Can we get a Runon's AP item? It would be nice for Teemo. I built Nashers, but it's far from being enough to be decent split pusher. I think the hard part about a Runon's AP item is just how many people would use it. One of the things about items is they have to justify their place in the system. And so technically, there's like 5 items I could make right now that Teemo would love and no one else would love. And so the question would be like, is that worth making those items? Is that worth their place in the shop? I ran into this when making Senna. One of the things that, no joke, would make Senna significantly more balanced, significantly easier to balance, is if there was AD support items. One of the items I tested for Senna was called Light of the Sentinels. And it was Ardent Sensor for AD attackers. Here's its stat line. It had AD, cooldown reduction, mana regen, and heal and shield power. That was the stat line. And it said, when you attack an enemy, mark them, and when your ally attacks the enemy, you both get an attack speed buff. It was Ardent Sensor. And I felt, at the time, and I still feel it to this day, that that was a really good item to support Senna working in the game. The problem, and this is why we didn't ship it, and I think it was reasonable not to ship it, the problem is that literally only Senna would use that item. There aren't 80 characters with shields and heals in the support role except Senna. And so while that item would be great for balancing Senna and great for making her make sense, it is hard to justify its inclusion in the game because it would be used by 1 character, maybe 2. Kayle could use it, actually, support Kayle, maybe support Lulu. And so that's the hard thing about, like, say something like an AP Runon's item is, yes, it would feel good for Teemo. Yes, that's really cool. But are there enough characters who actually would take advantage of it? There are some, like Teemo, Kayle. Teemo and Kayle both probably would like an AP Runon's. Can I get some insight on the cat changes? I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm on break right now, so I'm not up to date on the exact goals of any specific changes with cat that are going on right now. That change looks like to me like Cat is slightly overpowered, and so we are nerfing her to be slightly less powerful. Again, I don't know the exact context of any of that, but it sounds like what it looks like to me when looking at that is we buffed Cat, and it was slightly stronger than intended, and so now we are nerfing Cat to be slightly weaker. And probably the follow-up question to that is, well, why not go back on the buffs you did? Right? Like, that's very often the question is like, hey, well, if you're nerfing this character in this way, like, why not just go back on the buffs you did? So remember, the buffs we did were things to, like, her Q. And if you're wondering why we're not going back on the buffs, whether or not you agree with it, right? It's generally a thing where when we buff a character, it's often directionally in a way we want to push them, right? So if we buff a character and then nerf them somewhere else, usually the reason for that is because directionally we want to push them somewhere. And so the example, the reason that this might be good, these changes, is basically, I know we buffed her Q, and so now we're adjusting her blade ratio. And so this is basically her all-in is getting slightly worse, it seems like, whereas her laning and her ability to interact with her opponents in the lane is getting slightly better. That's kind of the idea there. And also, here, just let me double check like what the LoL Wiki Katarina. So another thing I want to note is the end result of these changes is in many situations, Cat's all-in will not be worse. And what I mean by that is last patch we buffed Bouncing Blade's cooldown AP ratio by 0.1, right? And so in situations where you're getting multiple daggers, your AP ratio is going to be going down. But the situations where you get a single dagger, right, your AP ratios, your essential combined AP ratio will be the same as it was before. And so basically, the end result of this is that her all-in, the end result of this in many situations, obviously not all of them, but the end result of this for many situations is going to be Cat's all-in is similar, while also her Q poke and laning is going to be a bit better. And that's the idea there. And so that is the directional shift of changes like that. Whether or not that's ideal, that's up to all you. I know you're asking this question probably because you don't think it's ideal. I look at those changes and so a lot of people are saying like Cat's a poke mage now. I'm not sure how true that is. I think one cost of this change will be her wave clear. because, you know, the passive is something she uses for wave clear, whereas Q is not as good for wave clear. So I would be wondering if her wave clear breakpoints are going to suffer or not. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how much 10% on her passive does to things like her wave clear breakpoints. That's something to think about. But mainly, overall, what's happening is the sum result of these changes is Kat's power budget is going to be shifting a bit more towards being able to interact with her Q, and a bit less from wave clear and like the multi-dagger all-ins. I don't know how often that happens. Again, I'm just giving you thoughts about things like that. Yeah. I hear some people arguing about skins in, not here, but I see some people arguing about skins in the chat. And one thing I think that is just an important context when it comes to skins in a game like League of Legends is League of Legends is a free-to-play game, and skins are what keep the lights on. So just remember that when you're talking about like why skins are made and why they exist and the systems surrounding skins, remember that skin sales and people buying skins are the reason nowadays that League of Legends exists, right? Like, without skins, League of Legends just could not continue. And so, doesn't mean every decision we make with skins is good. That's not what I'm saying. But I often see like people arguing about, you know, skins and monetization in the comments. And one thing I'll just remember in terms of like, if you want to think about how a company might think about skins in a game like League, is there's a big difference between skins in a game like League of Legends and skins in a game like Overwatch, say, old Overwatch, the one that you paid for. In terms of when a game has an upfront price, that creates very different needs for monetization than a game that tends to be free to play. And so oftentimes the folks who are buying skins are financing everything else. As an example, folks who buy skins are the ones who are basically financing Swarm, as an example. Swarm we made completely for free. Champions, it's actually interesting to think about. Every single thing I've worked on for 13 years, you've been able to get for free, which I think is pretty cool. I think that's a pretty cool thing, especially as a guy who grew up before free-to-play games existed. That used to like not be a thing, right? You always had to get games. And so like the players who are getting skins are to some degree financing all that cool stuff, right? Like, couldn't make Swarm if people didn't get skins, things like that. Now, again, doesn't mean every monetization thing we do is correct or perfect or ideal, right? But just mentioning that skin sales are an incredibly important part of the League of Legends ecosystem. And they're what enable us to make champions and make balance patches and make Swarm and all these different things. You say Riot wants money, but there are very few Frog and Bee skins. I think you are a liar. Okay, bad at Nami. Well, let's unpack that. League of Legends Bee skins. I think you are just you're just lying. Like, look at all. I need to make sure this is safe. Okay, great. You know, sometimes you go on Google and they give you some spicy results, right? Look at all of these. You say we don't have enough bee skins? Not enough bee skins? There's bees everywhere. But yes, let's make some more. That said, we could definitely use some more frog skins. That Milio skin, peak. That Milio skin, so good. We could definitely use some more frog skins. What is Riot doing? Not making enough frogs.